This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm Kevin Cirilli in Washington.
And I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky campaigned on bringing peace to Crimea today in Paris. He is getting his first shot at delivering on that promise. Zelensky is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time in a so-called Normandy format alongside French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. For more insight, joining us from Paris is Michael Bociurkiw, a global affairs analyst and former spokesman for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Michael, it's a phenomenal juxtaposition of pictures. On the one hand, you have closing arguments here in the impeachment inquiry. On the other, you have these leaders gathered in Paris. What would be the hope for this meeting? Do you have any hope?
Well, good to be with you, Vonnie. Of course, the hope is to bring peace finally to eastern Ukraine after 5 years of violence, which has cost up to 14,000 lives, billions of dollars of infrastructure damage, and millions displaced. Now, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, you're right, he campaigned on bringing peace to eastern Ukraine, as well as eradicating corruption. But he came here with a very low expectations, but also a very long shopping list. And above and beyond anything, he wants another prisoner swap, as well as return of control of the Ukraine-Russian border to Ukraine. And then after that, withdrawal of Russian-backed rebels, withdrawal of heavy weapons. But then on the other hand, you have Vladimir Putin, who woke up this morning probably not in a very good mood because he received word that the World Anti-Doping Agency has banned Russian athletes from the Olympics and the World Cup. So we just saw the first images of the leaders, the four leaders meeting, and it was quite extraordinary to see Putin and Zelensky for the first time across from each other.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, these pictures are absolutely so dramatic. And to see Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel there as well, clearly there must be something behind the scenes that are giving hope to these leaders. I mean, they wouldn't meet in Normandy format in Paris, extend all of this hospitality if they didn't think something was going to come out of this, and that perhaps Europe would end up looking like the bigger between Europe and the US.
Yeah, well, the stakes are very high, obviously, and this is the first time that these talks are taking place, not only with Zelensky, but also with Zelensky really without his main benefactor, the United States, the White House. So a lot of people, including myself, have written that that has put him in a very weak position. But having said that, you also have Vladimir Putin, who is very well known for playing the long game. He can go home with any agreement or no agreement whatsoever and sell it to the Russian people as a win. But I am very worried, Vonnie, about Zelensky because if he doesn't go home to Ukraine with some sort of win or victory, if he's seen as capitulating towards Russia, his political life could be very severely shortened. Already, there have been protests on the streets of Kiev warning him not to capitulate against Russia. So he's in a very, very difficult position.
Well, here in Washington, D.C., he's also at the eye of the political impeachment storm. And so I'm curious in terms of the international geopolitics of this, if Macron and Merkel are really going to be mediating anything, because Putin really would have his own agenda as it would relate to this very high-profile meeting, given the timing of such, with Zelensky.
Yeah, well, what a bizarre past few days, right? We had Rudy Giuliani going to Kiev to continue to dig up dirt on, the Bidens, and also every 2 seconds saying that Ukraine is a corrupt place. Then fast forward a few days later, and you have these hearings going on today, split screen across the Atlantic in Washington, and then also these meetings here. So it's drawn a lot of attention away from these meetings, but at the same time, I guess if you can take anything out of these hearings is that the Ukrainian story has gone out, that, the conflict has gone on for so long. And maybe that kind of more informative public, if you will put pressure on these leaders to bring an end to this terrible conflict. Look, the thing with Macron and Merkel, it's probably their last kick of the can, if you will, on this issue. And I think they feel morally obligated to finally bring an end to this conflict and to put pressure on Putin to do so. But they at the same time, Macron needs to, there are strikes right now in Paris, as you know. He needs to pander to his public, maybe end the block on French dairy products to Russia. And then Merkel is hungry for Russian gas and doesn't want to pressure Putin too much either. So very complex situation.
And I can't let you go without asking you about the other development from Putin's perspective, which is the issue of the Olympics and the ban. And so this, on a day in which that news is breaking, Vladimir Putin now at the meeting with some of the top world leaders, how is that, if at all, going to cast a shadow on the meetings?
Right. Well, knowing what we know of Vladimir Putin, this strikes him at the heart more than anything else, more than sanctions, more than leaders shying away from him, like at the G7 or the G20. It's something that he can't go back to Russia and say, oh, this is nothing to the Russian public, because this is something that the Russian public, I think, will really react to, is that this is shameful that our Russian athletes have been put in this position. And I think, just quickly, I think it'll further work to isolate Russia, both in the mentality of the Russian people and also in terms of their leaders. So we'll see how that plays out. But it did not turn out to be a very good morning for Vladimir Putin today.
All right, global affairs analyst Michael Bociurkiw, thank you very much for joining us from Paris.